Hey everybody, welcome to this video. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is our last exegetical video in reviewing our debate with Chris Date and James Harding on Trinity Radio. I'm Nathan, that's Steve. And, we've been doing a series. If you've been tuned into our channels for the last few weeks, we've been putting up 2 responses per week, responding to some point that they've made either in the debate itself, or they posted a couple of responses, about 5 hours total of conversations on the debate. And so we've been responding to that, taking our time, doing like 30 to 45-minute clips. Except yesterday's recording was like an hour, but hey, we had one long one, but it'll be good. So today what we want to do, we want to talk about a verse in Isaiah chapter 38. And in verse 18, it says, "For Sheol does not thank you. Death does not praise you. Those who go down to the pit do not hope for your faithfulness." So their argument is that, well, look, they're in Sheol, they go down to the pit, they don't praise you. And since they don't praise you, that means they're not conscious. And so that goes for the righteous and the unrighteous. And that's what Steve and I want to respond to today. Steve, do you have any opening thoughts before we pull the verses up and get going?
No. I mean, just basically what we're trying to do, or what we believe we've been doing throughout these response videos, is showing we're taking the verses they use in the debate as they believed indicated a strong view or support for their view. But throughout these videos, I think we've done it. We've shown that these verses aren't really strong arguments for their view at all. And personally, when studying these verses, I felt Isaiah 38:18 was one of the more challenging ones. But I believe tonight Nathan and I will show that it's once you do like we did in the previous videos, how are the words within these verses used throughout the Bible? Instead of looking at the verse or the passage in a vacuum, we look how these terms are used throughout the Bible, and we take a collaborative effort to put everything together and see how it's consistently used and understood. So yeah, let's go ahead and check out this passage.
All right, so I'll read it. It's Isaiah 38. We'll start in verse 16 just so the audience can get a feel for the context. It says, "O Lord, by these things men live, and in all these is the life of my spirit. O restore me to help and make me live. Behold, it was for my welfare that I had great bitterness. But in love you have delivered my life from the pit of destruction. For you have cast all my sin behind your back. For Sheol does not thank you." And this is the key part. "Death does not praise you. Those who go down to the pit do not hope for your faithfulness." All right, Steve, you heard it there. Sheol doesn't praise, it doesn't think, there's no hope, so they're not conscious. Why is that incorrect?
Okay, so when we first read this, what makes it challenging is that Hezekiah, we don't, at least especially in this context, he's not counted among the unrighteous. And so that was our argument for King David in Psalm 6:5 and 38 and 115. So it is the context of an unrighteous person, but this is the context of a righteous person, and that was what made it difficult. But I was reading it, just the verse itself, 38:18. And so when you're looking at it with, okay, this is talking about King Hezekiah, and we're applying verse 18 to Hezekiah. And so when you look at it just as that, then yeah, it's difficult. But then the context helps us get a better understanding of what's going on here. Okay, so
Could I even just jump in real quick? He does say here, "You've cast all my sins behind your back." So it seems like there was a time when he needed grace, right? So it could even be, because this says, "For Sheol does not thank you," right? So maybe he's also referring to the unrighteous. Maybe he's saying, I was in a state of wickedness, but you have now brought me back into a state of righteousness. And if I had not, for Sheol does not thank you, right? Like, that seems to me like a fine reading of this passage to say, like, if he had not repented, that would have been his position. Would you think that's fair?
Yes, he's thanking God for saving him from that, because that would have been his fate if he didn't repent, if God didn't save him. And so that's the context is gratitude. And so basically what Hezekiah is doing in this passage is he's thanking God for saving his soul, but he's also asking God, you saved my soul, also spare my physical life, prolong my physical life. And so that's what's going on throughout this chapter is Hezekiah was sick, and he was praying and asked God to prolong his life. And so in this passage, he's thanking God for saving his soul, but he's also like, you've already saved my soul. Now I'm asking you also to save my life, my physical life. So yeah, like when we go back to like when we think about this verse in the context of Revelation 20:13 to 15, has
You want me
we
to pull
have
that up?
sure.
All right, Revelation, what was it?
20:13 to 15.
13 to 15. Okay. I'll read it for everybody. It says, "And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire."
Okay. So within that passage, we have this idea that death, Sheol or Hades, and the ungodly are all going to face the second death. And so what's the commonality between those is, they all face the second death. It's not the righteous. And so death doesn't praise you. What it's equating the death with unrighteous. Sheol doesn't praise you. Again, it's equating Sheol with the unrighteous. It's those who don't praise the Lord are the ones who are going to be destroyed in the second death. And so I believe that's essentially what Hezekiah is alluding to.
And I think that makes sense, because those who are like in the covenant in Christ, we are the ones who praise the true God, and therefore became like the real God who lives forever, who lives eternally, who has joy and peace and love and all the characteristics of his nature. And then those who worship idols and don't follow the one true God, they become like those idols. They have eyes but don't see, ears but don't hear, etc., like we've been saying in the last few videos. So death and Hades and those that don't praise, they're eventually going to just become like their idols and be completely useless.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, so that's what's going on with 38:18. It's just, does death praise you? Does Sheol praise you? It's like, no, like this is all in the context of things like that are going to be destroyed in the second death. And what Hezekiah is doing is thanking God for saving him from that. He's not counted among those who don't praise God, who will be destroyed in the second death.
And again, I think that this is something that our opponents should think about. Was this Chris and James that brought up this verse? I know you've been going back and forth with other people too. So they brought up this verse?
Yes.
Okay, so Chris and James, if you are watching this, I've found this to be kind of a theme in a lot of your proof texts. It's like it seems like the verse just before it gives all the context we need, right? So like you have cast all my sins behind your back, and he's thanking God, right? It was for my welfare. I had great bitterness, but in love you delivered me, right? You've cast all my sins away. And then he's saying, you have save me from this situation where I wouldn't praise and wouldn't hope. And so it seems like if you read verse 18 in a vacuum or just by itself, yeah, it would plausibly sound like your view, because it's like, oh, this is Hezekiah saying this. He's a righteous man. So this is a problem. But if you just look at the surrounding verses, it seems like it makes perfect sense with what we've been saying in all of our other responses, that it is the wicked who do not praise. It is when they go down, they're held in chains and they're awaiting the judgment, and they are not happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so within this verse, we have the pit, and this passage, we have the pit, and every single time it's the pit is really for the ungodly, but it's the realm of the dead, and so it's specifically like the pit is what the ungodly experience. I guess that's a better way of saying it. It's the experience of the ungodly, because it's essentially the entire realm of the dead, but the righteous don't experience the pit the same in the same way. So let's pull up those verses here. Yeah.
We can do Psalm 28:1. To you, O Lord, I call, my rock. Be not deaf to me, lest you be silent to me. I become like those who go down to the pit.
Yeah. So in this verse, King David is saying that those, um, who the Lord don't hear, they are the ones who go down to the pit. And so, like, this isn't a universal statement. He's not saying that, this verse is limited to the ungodly, those that the Lord doesn't hear, because, their prayers are an abomination, because they've gone after false idols. And so again, so this is the idea with this verse, is that it's limited to the ungodly.
Now let's go to Psalm 88 as well. So we have a few verses here. I'll read these. O Lord God, my salvation, I cry out today and night before you, or I cry out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength, like one set loose among the dead, like the slain lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. Selah.
Yeah. So I
this
mean,
is the Psalm of the sons of Korah here.
Yeah. So this is, so King David didn't write this. It was the sons of Korah. But yeah, we have this same theme as really or Psalm 6 and Psalm 38. We have this idea of discipline and wrath and pleading for mercy. And again, it's saying, let's see.
I'm like the ones you remember no more. And he's saying, like, your judgment is on me. Like, I've been counted among those who go down to the pit, right? So that's talking about judgment, right? He's been judged as a man with no strength, who is not going to be remembered anymore. He's cut off from his hand. He's been in the depths, right? He's in the dark in the deep. His wrath is upon him.
Yeah.
Like all this.
Yeah. So like we get, it says regions dark and deep. And so, I mean, just from this here, like we don't have anything specific for, is there also a region of that isn't dark, that is light? And as we brought up in the previous video, God himself in Job 38 in verse 19, he described, a place of light and a place of darkness. And so that goes perfectly along with how we read this. And then, in Micah 7:8-10, Micah said that he would be, that God would be a light to him in the darkness. So a light to him in the pit. So what the righteous experience in their darkness or in the pit, it's in a different region, so to speak, as the ungodly.
Yeah. And I'm trying to anticipate some objections here. And so Chris and James might say, okay, well, you're taking our verses figuratively. So why can't we take your verses figuratively? Why can't we say that when Sheol refers to, those going down into the pit, like that's the unrighteous, and they're having a different experience, and those that are righteous having a different experience? Why can't we take that as figurative? Well, like, why are your verses the ones that we should read literally? Like, I can imagine them asking a question like that. How would you respond?
Well, what we do is, follow the hermeneutical rules that I put out in my book. So the third one is we don't, anything within poetry, prophecy, wisdom literature, we automatically assume that it has to be interpreted literally. And then the fourth rule is it can be interpreted, or I'm sorry, we assume that it has to be interpreted figuratively. It requires an interpretation. And then the fourth rule is something within prophecy or poetry can be interpreted literally if a didactic teaching teaches it. If we have something, an idea of it that is within, the teachings of Jesus or the apostles. And so within the teachings of Jesus and the apostles, we do have this idea of there being two regions within the realm of the dead, where the righteous are and where the wicked are. And so we use, verses like Psalm 23:43, 2 Corinthians 5:8, Philippians 1:23, 1 Thessalonians 5:10 and 23. So all those verses describe a place, describe paradise being where Jesus went in the heart of the earth. And so that's how when Paul says to be absent from the body is to be at home with the Lord, at home with the Lord in paradise, because that's where the Lord is our shepherd, as King David described in Psalm 23. So he's our shepherd there. Like we're not abandoned when we go to the pit, so to speak. So it's like Joseph. God didn't abandon Joseph when his brothers threw him into the waterless well. God didn't abandon Daniel when he was thrown into the lion's den or the pit with the lions. God didn't abandon Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego when they were thrown into the flaming furnace. And so that same concept that we find throughout the Bible of God's people, and then another example is I believe it's in Exodus 10, 20, I think 23, but it describes 3 days of darkness for all of Egypt except for God's people. For God's people experience light for those 3 days. And again, I believe that's a kind of foreshadowing of Jesus's time, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, because he was he was in the realm of the dead and the darkness, like Egypt is often described as like the place of slavery and sin, but in that place they had light for 3 days and 3 nights while their enemies didn't. But yeah, so it's a common theme throughout the Bible that for God's people, while they're in the midst of darkness, God is there with them. When they're in the pit, God is there with them. When they're surrounded by the flames, they're not touched by the flames. It's the same idea. So yeah, and then also we have darkness with their didactic teachings also with Second Peter 2:9 and Jude 12-13. So we have this idea of both darkness and light within the realm of the dead using didactic teachings, and that's why we apply those teachings in how we interpret verses like this.
Yes. And I think that's the key, is that we're using a hermeneutic, and in our other responses, we've shared the hermeneutic on the screen, the principles, so that people who are watching these videos, hold our feet to the fire. If we are abandoning one of these rules, if we are not listening to one of these rules, if you see one of the verses, the way we're interpreting it, and we're violating a rule from somewhere, point it out to us, because we're laying our cards on the table. We're saying, this is how we're doing our exegesis. This is how we are interpreting these texts, and this is why we're interpreting them this way. And I think the difference is, Chris and James, you guys haven't provided a hermeneutic, right? I don't know what your hermeneutic is. So the best, and during the debate, you said, and in response videos as well, you guys have said, oh, well, you guys are saying that we're doing this, like we're just taking poetic and prophetic teachings and interpreting them the way that we think they should be interpreted, and then interpreting everything else in light of that. But we haven't seen anything else from you guys, so that's why we're saying that. And so if you guys had a hermeneutic that we could look at and see how you're following it, we would love to see it. But I think that's the difference here, is the hermeneutic removes the subjectivity. It's like, okay, we have these principles, we're laying them on the table, they're objective, they're outside of us. They're not meant to lead me to a particular conclusion. It's just saying like, hey, we have a presupposition that Jesus and the apostles never taught false doctrine. And so we take their teachings, their didactic teachings, and then we read poetry and wisdom literature in light of that. And so, I think that this removes the subjective element, because again, they might just be able to put their foot down otherwise and say, oh, well, no, we're going to take your verses figuratively and we're going to take ours literally. And if we don't have a hermeneutic, there's no way to break that if we're going to be stubborn. Like if you're going to be stubborn and we're going to be stubborn, without a hermeneutic, we kind of just are at an impasse. It's like, okay, well, what do we do? But when we have a hermeneutic, we can point to it and say, okay, if we follow this, you'll end up on our side. And again, it's not to lead us to that conclusion, but it's just where you end up whenever you follow it.
Yeah, because those rules in themselves don't lean a particular way. And I think if we, before we started any kind of discussion on any theological subject, if we're like, okay, before we start studying this, can we agree that something within the Psalms, like that's poetry, and if we find something within the Psalms, we can't just take it as it is. Like we have, if we interpret it a certain way, we have to support that interpretation, by something that isn't within the context of poetry.
And we all agree with that, by the way, because if you read every poetic phrase straightforwardly, then you would just be affirming the Bible has contradictions, and we can't do that, right? If we're Christian and we want to presuppose that the Bible is the word of God and it's infallible, it can't be wrong. Contradictions are wrong, right? So you'd be saying there's an error in the Bible. So we have to have a way to delineate between what we read literally and what we don't.
Yeah. And basically, Nathan and I, we have a hermeneutic that explains why we interpret this literally, but we don't have anything from, as Nathan was saying, we don't have anything from Chris or James to explain why they interpret Ecclesiastes 9 and Psalm 6 and Psalm 38 or Psalm 115, all those literally. It's like, you have to have something besides your own authority that you're appealing to why this is literal and why this is figurative. Like, and so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, like, we're trying to show, like, this is something that all Christians should agree upon. The idea that anything within Psalms has to be interpreted by something outside that within a didactic teaching. Like, I can't just like for example, in Ecclesiastes, there's a verse that talks about humans and animals all suffer the same fate. The breath of life comes out of them and they waste away or something. And so if we were to take that in a vacuum and interpret it as it is, okay, well, if you say that humans have any more reward after they die than animals, then you're contradicting the Bible. So whatever you say about humans, you have to apply to animals and vice versa. But again, Ecclesiastes isn't intended to be a place where we start our doctrine. Like, if you're trying to start your doctrine on that verse, you're going to create contradictions elsewhere. And that's what we're saying with Ecclesiastes 9:5. That's not your foundation. That can't be a foundational verse. But yeah, let's go on to the next one here.
Yeah, hopefully we've made our point clear for the audience. Like, Chris and James, if you're watching this, again, this is not a dig at you guys. We like you guys as people. Like, I love you as both as brothers. This is just us asking, if you do another response video to us, what is your hermeneutic? Like, what is the principle you're using, so that we can, because you can hold our feet to the fire. Like, go through the rules. We've shown them on the screen. And then if there's any place where we are violating them, point it out and say, this is where you broke this rule. This is where you broke this rule. And we want to be corrected if that's the case. And then show us, what are your hermeneutical principles? By what method are you coming to these conclusions? And if you can't show us that, then I'm just going to keep following this hermeneutic that Steve and I have. And when I do so, I arrive at the conclusion that we are conscious in the afterlife. So this is Isaiah 14, 12 through 21. So we're going to do a little bit of reading here. It says, how you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you are cast out, away from your grave, like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. You are not to be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land. You have slain your people. May the offspring of evildoers never more be named. Prepare slaughter for his sons, because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities.
Okay, so verse 4 says, this is to the king of Babylon. Okay, so like a lot of people, I believe what is going on here is God is comparing the king of Babylon to Satan. He's like he's basically saying, you're of your father, the devil. How Jesus did with the Pharisees, and so he's making that comparison. He's like saying, this is who you are, like not in a literal sense, but a comparable sense. And so we have this idea here with a human being judged in a comparable way as Satan and so a fallen angel, which is, what Isaiah 24, 21 to 22 talks about. And again, it's to the pit, to the far reaches of the pit. And so it's like, again, it's, if we're seeing the pit is like the literal grave, like it just doesn't make sense. And, you have to say, well, it's figurative, it's poetic. But again, it's like, okay, if you say that, what's your basis? Where does Jesus or the apostles like confirm your interpretation that it's not that, there isn't this realm of the dead? Because
I also want to point out here too that there is a lot of rhetoric going on in this
yes.
passage here. Like if you guys notice, I mean, the rhetoric that we've pointed out time and time again in these videos is, there's this king. He's great, right? He made the nations tremble. He shook kingdoms, right? So he's great on the earth, right? He's the man, so to speak. Like in earthly terms, he's the man. He sits on a throne and he has power, and he looks down at others, and he treats people without justice and all of these things. But notice what his legacy is going to be. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who did this? Right? So they're going to look down and you're going to be shamed. It's an honor shame culture again. So your legacy in the end is going to be shame. You're going to be put to shame by the God of Israel. You are going to be put down into the far reaches of the pit, and your legacy is going to be nothing. It's going to be meaningless because you became like your idols. But those of us who are not following idols, those of us who follow the God of Israel, we will be like him. And this rhetoric is just teeming in this passage in Isaiah. It's everywhere. It's like this honor shame language, this, taking on the, being thrown down from your pride, like all of that. It's this is just a theme again. And this is why we interpret these verses this way, because it's clearly thematic. This is something that is repetitively done. Like I almost feel like a broken record at this point. Like I keep saying the same thing, but it's like, it's just so clear and it just keeps coming up over and over again. So this is how we would interpret these kinds of verses.
Yeah. So
we want to go to,
let's go on to the next one.
All right. Lamentations. I've been hunted like a bird by those who were my enemies without cause. They flung me alive into the pit and cast stones on me. Water closed over my head. I said, I am lost. I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help. You came near when I called on you, and you said, do not fear.
Okay, so this is, a righteous person now in the pit. But what's the distinction here? He says, I called on your name, O Lord, from the depths of the pit. You heard my plea. Do not close your ear to my cry for help. You came near when I called on you. You said, do not fear. And so that to me sounds a whole lot like Psalm 23:4. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So that's the pit, the same thing. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. For your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Because he's with the shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. And so that's what is going on here. And so, like, the pit is inherently negative. Like, when Joseph was thrown into it, when Daniel in the lion's den, and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, those are all negative things. But the idea
The
is
note
that,
there says they end my life in the pit. So that's an interesting little side note too. They flung me or ended my life into the pit.
yeah. So it sounds like he was left for dead.
Yeah.
He died in the pit. But then so I mean, if he died, then he called to the Lord, and so he would have been saved before then. But that's the idea, is that those of us in Christ, when we're in the pit, so to speak, he's going to be there with us. We're not going to have any reason to fear, because he's the shepherd. And since Jesus is our shepherd, there's never going to be a time where we're not in his fold. Like, if physicalism were true, then from death to resurrection, you wouldn't necessarily be in his fold because you don't exist. And so what we're saying is that with Psalm 23 and all these other verses, and of course we're reading them through the interpretation of didactic teachings by Jesus and the apostles, that Jesus is our shepherd. He's our shepherd within paradise.
Oh, and I do want to say, I know this might sound pedantic, but I just want to clarify for the audience. Chris and James are not full physicalists. They're Christian physicalists. So they do believe the immaterial exists. They just believe that humans are physical. So, like, when it comes to anthropology, humanity, they believe that humans are only physical entities. There's nothing immaterial. There's no immaterial soul. When the body dies, you're dead. You don't exist until the resurrection. So that's their position. So when we say physicalism, that's what we're referring to, just so people understand. Yeah, and I think that again, and not to sound like a broken record, but okay, this is a person who their life ended, okay, and after that they called out to him, and from the depths of the pit he was heard. Again, how do we know that we can read this literally, right? Because on Chris and James's view that we just explained, no one can call out in the pit. If you're dead, you're not conscious, you can't call out, you don't exist. And so they might want to say, oh, well, this is just figurative poetry because they don't exist. But again, what's your hermeneutic? Why is it that you read that figuratively and not Ecclesiastes 9 or Psalm 6, right? That's what I would like to know from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so since Jeremiah was a prophet from God, I think it's safe to say that, like, when if he was saying that, as you read that note, if he was saying, or prophesying that if he were to die in a pit, and then he would call out to the Lord would hear him, and he'd be there with him. He would have no reason to fear. So that's the idea, is that what he's saying is that he knows that if he dies, the Lord is going to continue to be with him. That's the idea behind this, is that even after we die, those who are the Lord's, we are going to remain with the Lord, and the Lord is going to remain with us. That's I believe essentially the prophecy that Jeremiah was saying here.
And in Matthew 28, Jesus says, I'll be with you always to the end of the age. Like, always. I would want to ask James and Chris, what does it mean when he says always? On their view, if you don't exist, is he with you? I don't know. I would see it hard to mesh that with their view, that he is. In what meaningful sense is he with you, right? Or in Deuteronomy, when God says to his people, like, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. It's like, well, if you go to the pit and you don't exist, kind of seems like, you know what I mean? It's like, is he with you, like, in any meaningful sense? I don't know. So let's move on to Zechariah here. Chapter 9, verses 9 through 11. It says this: Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall speak peace to the nations, and his rule shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit.
All right. So again, we have this idea of the waterless pit. And so, again, Joseph, he was thrown into a waterless well or waterless pit. And so depending on your, can you pull up like other versions of that?
Sure. What translation?
Well, if you could go to Bible Hub, and we'll just compare different translations. I want to see if any of them say dungeon or prison.
That was Zechariah
9:11.
9 through 11.
Yeah, or yeah, just 11.
Okay, and you want to look at the Hebrew?
No, just the different translations.
Oh, parallel. Was that what that would be?
Yeah.
Okay, dungeon, pit. There's no water, pit. Oh, prisoners of the pit. Prisoners from the waterless pit. Waterless pit. I see the prisoners though in a lot of them. Is that
Yeah.
like a specific thing you're wanting? Cistern.
Yeah. So I think all of them say prisoners.
Yeah, I'll release your prisoners from the waterless cistern, the waterless pit.
Yeah.
Um,
And so in verse 9, we know that Jesus fulfilled that in it during his ministry in the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Then in verse 10, it talks about him establishing his kingdom of eternal peace. And so it's basically with verse 11. And so this is why Zechariah has to be very carefully read and understood, because it's not like it's a what's the word I'm thinking of, like it's not linear, it's not in chronological order, because between verse 9 and 10 you have at least 2,000 years. You have about 2,000 years between 9 and 10, because what Jesus did in verse 9 was fulfilled about almost 2,000 years ago. And we're still looking for verse 10 to occur in the future. And so verse 11, that's not going to happen after Jesus begins his eternal reign. Like it's going to be before it. And so, like, if we're looking at the timeline presented all throughout the Bible, before the Messiah begins to reign, everyone is raised from the dead and judged. And so according to Zechariah, he's prophesying. So he's speaking under the authority of God, of the Holy Spirit, that basically before the Messiah begins to reign, that's when the prisoners will be raised from the waterless pit, from the dungeon, from the prison. And so, to be consistent, you can't say that they're in heaven now, because that they're not in the heaven. The waterless pit is not in heaven. So I think Chris and James, they would probably agree with us with that interpretation, because they would say, well, yeah, they are, because Sheol, Hades, that's the waterless pit, and the dead aren't raised from there until Judgment Day, and so, or the day of the Lord. And so like we'd be in agreement there. And so it's like, okay, so you're following our hermeneutic as far as these verses go with the timeline, but now apply the same method to get that timeline to also get the conscious, whether or not the righteous that are saved from the waterless pit, if they're experiencing God's light and his presence, and they aren't fearing, they have no fear, and they have hope, because those are experiential descriptions.
Yeah. And experience presupposes consciousness. So,
yeah.
All right, so that was all the verses we wanted to walk through to kind of get this point, as far as like the pit and what it means. So I think we've established from even if we just read Isaiah 38, I think we could see our point. Like he was in a state where he needed grace and he was saved from that condition. But I think all the other verses just kind of establish this even more. Like this is a theme, just like all our other themes we pointed out. This is how you interpret poetry. Whenever you see a theme, you follow the theme. So I know you had something pulled up that you wanted to share as well. Do you want to go ahead and have that up or?
Yeah. Let's see here.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the issues with both, I believe, Christian physicalism and the idea that we go straight to heaven when we die is both have a problem with paradise. They need a way to explain how paradise went from being on earth to being in heaven, and there are no proof texts that explain paradise being taken up to heaven. They don't exist, and so a lot of times people will refer to Revelation 2:7. It says, "Those who conquer will be granted to eat from the tree of life." However, that verse doesn't say when that will happen or where. With it says the tree of life in paradise, and so it doesn't say where paradise is in that moment, and it doesn't say when they'll eat of it. And then at the end of Revelation, in Revelation 22, it talks about the tree of life being there in the new heavens, new earth. But we are going to be in the new heavens, new earth, and we're not there now. So to say that, oh, because Revelation 22 describes paradise being in the new heavens, new earth, it must be in heaven. Like, again, you and I, we're not in heaven, but we're going to be there in the new heavens, new earth. So just having a description of something being in the new heavens, new earth does not inherently imply that it's currently in heaven. And so, again, that means there are no proof texts for paradise to be currently in heaven. And so, what
Because
we're
the new heavens and the new earth is going to be like here, right? Like we're going to be called into the sky. We're going to be given new bodies, and then the old order is going to pass away, and then we're going to come down and reign on the new earth, right? So, um, it's perfectly plausible that the tree of life. First of all, we don't necessarily need to even grant that the tree of life is literal. Like there doesn't need to be a literal tree of life in Sheol. I don't know how you feel about that, but or paradise, but I think the idea of the tree of life is just that that's what lets you live forever. Like we're not inherently immortal. So like in Genesis, whenever Adam and Eve are, whenever they sin, God basically says we have to remove them from the garden so they can't eat from the tree and live forever. So in other words, if there is some literal tree, then I don't see why the tree wouldn't come up with us to the new heavens and the new earth. But if there isn't a literal tree and that's just like a figural poetic representation of what grants us eternal life, the fact that we have this promise of eternal life, either way, that we have to reconcile all those verses together. So
yeah. So, like, I'm not married to the idea that the tree of life is literal or not literal. Like, I'm
yeah,
okay either way.
yeah,
But so, like, when I believe paradise itself, when we're caught up into the air, into the clouds, after everyone is judged, and the earth is being destroyed by fire, I believe paradise will be on the earth at that
mhm,
point in time. Like, but it won't be consumed by the fire. It'll be protected by the fire, and then like there's going to be a merging between with paradise in the heavenly Jerusalem that comes down. Like how that looks like, how that's going to work, I don't know. I trust God will do it.
mhm,
But yeah,
yeah,
because that's what's described is the city comes down. So the city is different from the garden. I feel like that's an important distinction. The heavenly city is different from the paradise of God, the garden of God. But in the new heavens and new earth, they're going to be joined. They're going to be, uh, integrated with each other.
made
And
one.
yes,
Because
and
the
we
Hebrew word for earth is feminine. The Hebrew word for heavens is masculine in Hebrew. And so the idea is that in the end, God's intention is for them to be married, to become one. So heaven and earth will unite in the end, which is God's end goal.
yes. Okay, so what we're going to read here, this is an excerpt from my book, and so this is, I believe, in Ezekiel 31, um, we have something to support our argument that paradise is currently in the realm of the dead, which again, no other view can show where paradise is other than the realm of the dead. Okay, so 31 or Ezekiel 31:16 encompasses all the characteristics of paradise and the realm of the dead discussed throughout this chapter. And so this is from chapter 3 in my book, where it's titled The Paradise of God. And so that's where I go through and I talk about all the verses that support paradise being in the heart of the earth. Okay, so this is verse 16. I made the nations quake at the sound of its fall when I cast it down to Sheol with those who go down to the pit, and all the trees of Eden, the choice and best of Lebanon, all that drink water, were comforted in the world below. The context of this verse is God proclaiming judgment upon Pharaoh and how he was about to destroy Egypt in the same manner he destroyed Assyria. In verse 3, God compared Assyria to a giant cedar. In verse 16, described what happened after it was chopped down. The people within Assyria perished, and God proclaimed to Pharaoh that he and his people will have the same fate. The contrast within this verse is also very important. It starts off by describing the nation's people within the realm of the living quaking in fear at Assyria's destruction. Then it describes this event causing the trees of Eden to be comforted. This is because there would have been lots of God's people in paradise who had been persecuted by the Egyptians, and they would have been comforted knowing that those who killed them would no longer be able to slay any more of God's children. If the people in the world below consisted of only the unfaithful, it would not make sense for sinful people to be comforted by God's judgment upon a sinful nation. This demonstrates that the trees present this demonstrates that the trees represent people rather than literal plants, and Eden is an obvious reference to the Garden of Eden or paradise. Therefore, when God said all the trees of Eden, he was referring to all the people in the garden or the paradise in the world below. The concept of there being a world below is consistent with the realm of the dead being in the heart of the earth, as Jesus described in Matthew 12:40. This means that Ezekiel 31:16 is neither describing this realm or the one where Jesus is currently reigning at the right hand of the Father. It is quite possible Ezekiel 31 is at least one of the sources that led to people in the first century to believe that there was a third realm where the dead reside, and the Garden of Eden, paradise, is within it. So yeah, so we have this
So the
idea.
idea here is that to make sure I understand it. So the idea here is that paradise is described in Ezekiel 31 in a way that the view that we go straight to heaven and James and Chris's view cannot adequately explain.
Right.
Okay. So there's the trees, which refer to people. So there are people down there that are quaking whenever a nation was judged.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have they're comforted in the world below, and again, it's like that, because the world below is referring to the realm of the dead, and you know they would have to say, oh, it's figurative language. But again, okay, if you say it's figurative language, what's the basis upon which you say that's figurative?
Mm-hmm.
Like we
And
have,
if it's just your interpretation of Ecclesiastes 9, then that's subjective, right? You need some didactic teaching to supplement your view.
yeah.
Or hermeneutic.
What's the difference between? Let's say this was our argument. The dead are conscious in within the realm of the dead because Ezekiel 31 describes it, and that's our argument. And then they're saying no. Ecclesiastes 9:5 describes them being dead, and so that's the extent of both of our arguments. Is, you know, we're both sides are using their subjective interpretations of verses that inherently require an interpretation. And so you would have what you would have is two subjective interpretations. It's like, oh, my subjective interpretation is correct, yours is wrong, and the other one's saying the the other way around. And so that's the point of my rules, is to avoid that. Is because I came up with those rules because that's what I saw. That's how I saw these arguments going. Like with people arguing with we go straight to heaven with people in soul sleep. You have people who believe we go straight to heaven interpreting verses within Revelation as literal, and then going back and like, oh, when Jesus said that his disciples won't join him in heaven until he comes back, he doesn't mean that, and
Mhm.
yeah, people believe in soul sleep. Oh yeah, like when he said today you'll be today you'll be with me in paradise, the comma's not there, and he didn't really mean that. So I was like, I start with the presupposition. Yes, Jesus did mean what he taught, and then we interpret Revelation through what he taught. We interpret these verses in poetry through what he taught, and same thing with the apostles. We start with the presupposition that they correctly taught doctrine. They taught correct doctrine, and then we use the correct teachings that they taught to interpret Revelation and verses within poetry.
Yeah. And I feel like we have, beat that dead horse a lot in this video, but it's important. It is important to know, like, hey, what's your hermeneutic? If we're wrong, we want to know why. What is your standard by which you're judging our view as incorrect? And if it's just an appeal to an interpretation, then I think that we're going to have some issues there. So, Steve, we've kind of, I think, exhausted this topic. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed this. And for those that are still watching, I'm sure they do. So this is our last response to Chris and James as far as exegesis goes. So we're going to do one more video. That's the plan, on near-death experiences and things like that, to kind of talk about some empirical data that supports our thesis as well. But as far as the exegesis goes, do you have any overall thoughts? You could comment on any of the videos we've done at this point, and yeah, I'll leave some comments as well, and then we can head out of here.
Yeah. So I mean, in the debate, I feel like their primary verses for their argument were Ecclesiastes 9:5, Psalm 6:5, Psalm 115, basically the whole psalm, and Isaiah 38:18, and then in First Corinthians 15. And I feel like we've done a thorough job of going through all of those verses and explaining why they don't support their view. And when you actually go through and look at the patterns within those verses, you see that it supports our view. In contrast, I don't think they've been able to do that with any of the verses that we brought up. With 2 Peter 2:9, it's like, oh, it could be interpreted another way, and therefore, that's the correct way. The comma could possibly maybe be in a different place, and that 895 versions that have it after they're all wrong, and like
Yeah.
it takes a whole lot more I don't know, bias. I don't know a good way to say it, but like I don't know, it's like, yeah, I don't think anybody can really say they made a stronger case for their view.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. I'll just say overall thoughts on the debate. I really enjoyed the debate. I thought it was a great time. I thought it was brotherly. I thought it was thorough, though obviously I think all of us would have liked to have said a lot more, hence our like 10 responses at this point regarding the debate. Like I think all of us wanted to say a lot more than we had the chance to in those like 2 hours or whatever it was. But it was a great time. Chris and James, love you both. Hope that you guys are take all these criticisms in stride, and hopefully we can, come together. I mean, I would love to unite with you guys on this, and we can join together as annihilationists and and on this view, and we can, join forces and then go against the idea that we go straight to heaven. Because honestly, I think that's a big misconception in modern Christianity, and so we need as many people on our team as possible. And so it's like if we're not all like, we're united in the fact that we go to Sheol, but it's like if we have this fundamental disagreement about what that's like, it's going to be harder to be on a united front in that regard. So yeah, I would love to have you guys come over to our side. I do think obviously our case is stronger, and I think that in light of the case, you guys should join our team. And yeah, we would love to do further conversations with you, further discussions with you. You guys are both welcome to come on my channel anytime. I'm sure Steve would say the exact same thing. If you guys want to have any private discussions, anything like that, yeah, just let us know. And yeah, overall, again, I think our case is stronger. I think we've shown that their verses, when you follow the themes throughout the Old Testament and New Testament, and when you follow our hermeneutic, you'll see that our case is correct. And the hermeneutic isn't biased. That's the cool thing about it. It's like, okay, Jesus taught didactic teachings. The apostles taught didactic teachings. Let's take those, and then let's go to poetry and wisdom literature and, interpret those in light of what the didactic teachings say. I think that's a sound hermeneutic. It's not like biased towards our view. It's not like Steve created this hermeneutic to get to our view, So, yeah, I think overall it's been a lot of fun, and thank you guys for watching. If you've watched this far, we really appreciate it. Do you have any closing comments before we head out of here?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed making these videos with you, and yeah, I enjoyed the debate. I enjoyed Chris and James's responses, and along with Glenn, and hopefully yeah, we can get on the same page, because like you said, I believe so many eschatological views can be refuted if we were on the same page. There's so much confusion, and that's ultimately my goal with my book and with these videos, is to eliminate confusion. And so if that, like, that's why my rules are the way that they are, because if I'm wrong, it makes it easy for people to prove me wrong, and that's the entire point. I think we should all want to be in a place where we want to spend 0% of our time teaching and defending false doctrines. And so if Nathan and I are wrong, I want to spend not another second teaching our view. Like, I want to be corrected, and that's the whole point of the rules. They put me and Nathan and anyone who uses them at a disadvantage, because if we say something within poetry, it has to be interpreted, or it has to be interpreted literally, like, regardless of what our interpretation is, we have to support that interpretation with something Jesus or the apostles taught. And that is a very difficult position to put yourself in. And again, that's intentional. Like, I'm like, it's intentionally tying our hands behind our backs and saying that we can still get to it. That's how we get to the correct interpretation, is because we're no longer at that point depending upon our own reasoning, our own logic, our own thoughts. We're depending on the teachings of Jesus and his apostles, led by the Holy Spirit. And so we're relying on them to get our doctrine.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with everything you just said. I think that, yeah, I would love to, like I said, join forces and let's take down the false doctrines. And it would be a lot easier if we had you guys on our team. So come on over, Chris and James. We would love to see it. Red Rover, come on over. All right. So like I said, our plan is to do one more response on near-death experiences, because we do think that that is another point in our favor, that life definitely continues after death. If people have they're brain dead, on their view, they should have no experiences. And the problem is, a lot of people come back from that and they report experiences. So that's going to be a problem. We'll talk about that in the next video. For all of you guys watching on the Epitome, go check out Steve's channel. I'll put a link in the description below. If you're watching on Steve's channel, come check out the Epitome. I have a lot of apologetics videos on the resurrection and other topics like that. So I'd love to have you guys here. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, and we will see you guys in the next one.
God bless.